While the sculpture at the Toy Museum is largely the work of one person, our next story shows how art can be made by groups of people too.
Arts KC, the Regional Arts Council, has some cool new digs in the Crossroads. So when they needed a signature piece, they turned to a man who makes murals, graffiti artist J.T. Daniels.
J.T. and Live KC called out the troops and proceeded to, in just a matter of hours, combine their skills for something big, bold, and colorful.
Producer, videographer John McGrath saw it all.
We're really excited to partner with Live KC to put on this event. What you are in right now is the Office of Arts KC. So for those of you who don't know, we're the Regional Arts Council here in Kansas City. So that means we serve the 5-county metropolitan area. We bring together resources to support artists, individuals, and businesses who want to support the creative community here in Kansas City. Some of you may not know, Kansas City is one of only 17 markets that has a professional symphony, opera, and ballet. That's pretty cool. The arts are something that contributes a $273 million economic impact annually, which is pretty great, raises a lot of money for us, and it makes it a place where I'm psyched to just live.
Today we're just working on a mural for Arts KC. It's supposed to be a really group interactive mural. It's supposed to bring everyone that's interested, at least in KC, the millennial age, 25 to 35, I believe, working on a KC mural that's supposed to encompass the feeling and the sense of the people that live here.
Pretty unique experience. Glad to see, representing Kansas City well and everything that the city's about. Homegrown artists, homegrown drawing.
So we have the letters K and C. Within that, there's a lot of different characters and faces, and mostly cartoon faces that I've interbred within that. And they all represent people I've ever met, I know, I've seen, or I've run into, or I've heard about, or had heard stories about in KC.
I just started on the arrow. I figured you can't go wrong with an arrow. It can be whatever color you want it to be. And so right now it's going to be orange. But I'm excited to see what other colors people are going to paint the arrows. It's going to be really cool.
Everyone's scared to make art because they're scared to make a mistake.
I don't want to mess it up. I tend to ruin things in life, and I don't want to do that.
Whereas, usually when you make a mistake, that's the thing that people notice the most, and it's not in a bad way, oh, I like that. Do we have a table for the demonstration?
We're all going to get a chance to graffiti now.
What are they learning here?
Different basic spray paint techniques, how close to get to the canvas, how to layer stencils on top of each other. More or less, we're kind of practicing abstract design, which is something that I teach to students. It's this really quick way of self-expression and getting out of the ordinary and just kind of freeing up and making mistakes but learning at the same time. And then with the colors we're using, it's more like 90s pop art or 80s pop art. So we just kind of get to think about that, how can you use art as a catalyst for change? And then for my high school kids, I try to show them you can do art and make a career out of it outside of high school, and you don't have to feel weird or anything else. Your talent matters.
This is going to go up on the side of our building that faces Town Topic out on Baltimore. So every time you come down the Crossroads, you can say, hey, I helped do that. That's a thing that I contributed to.